My best friend got drunk and was picked up by a few men. I rushed in without a second thought to save her, but she blamed me for ruining her plan to marry into a wealthy family. I told her I overheard the rich second-generation heirs planning to use her for a blind box game. She listened to me and gave up the idea. Later, there really was a girl who climbed the social ladder by picking up the pieces and married into a wealthy family. My best friend was furious. When the spoiled rich second-generation heir showed interest in me, she didn't hesitate to throw me to the wolves, letting me be toyed with and humiliated. In the end, she even pushed me off a cliff, disguising it as an accidental death. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day my best friend launched her plan to marry into a wealthy family. Julia stood before the full-length mirror, striking seductive poses in her revealing battle attire. Summer, what do you think of this outfit? I even specially rented Balenciaga stockings from the second-hand market. She applied a deep red lipstick to her lips, then blew a satisfied kiss to her reflection in the mirror. I just stared at her blankly, unwilling to give up, and asked, then what should I wear? Julia raised her freshly manicured fingers and picked up a dress in a striking combination of bright red and vibrant green. This is what I specially picked for you. Hurry up and put it on, we're going to be late. I am finally convinced that I have truly been reborn. In my previous life, I started a business with Julia, and the beginning was tough. Word came that the young master of the Santos group had booked an entire bar. He was a notorious playboy, and signing deals at the bar was a common occurrence for him. We seized the opportunity and rushed over. She also made me wear this outfit to better accentuate her own enchanting allure. Who would have thought that before the contract could be signed? Julia was already drunk and unconscious. While I was in the restroom, I happened to overhear a few men brazenly chatting and laughing. How about that woman in the black dress? She looks wild enough. Let's all go for it. Whoever leaves a child behind will be responsible for raising it, and the others will each pay 10 million in compensation. Lately, this game has been super popular. It's called opening blind boxes. I shook my slightly dizzy head and returned to the booth. Just in time to see Julia being carried away, draped over Ethan Santos's shoulder. Under the dim lighting, I realized that Ethan Santos was the very person who had first suggested opening blind boxes. Without a care for my own unsteady steps, I rushed forward and snatched Julia back from Ethan Santos's grasp. Bitch, mind your own damn business. Ethan Santos, his mood ruined by me, darkened his expression and slapped me across the face. He waved his hand, and several men blocked our path from behind. With trembling hands, I smashed a bottle of imported liquor, pointing the shards of glass at Ethan Santos's face. Don't think I don't know what you're up to. If you don't let us leave now, believe me, someone will die here today. I took Julia and fled the bar, but she immediately broke free from my grasp. What are you doing? Ethan Santos is someone I've had my eye on for a long time. Who knows? By tomorrow, I might be Mrs. Santos. Looking at Julia, who showed no sign of being drunk, I realized she had been pretending all along. I simply told her the facts I had heard, and she was half convinced, half doubting, never bringing up the matter again. But having offended Ethan Santos, our small company was targeted at every turn. Julia soon couldn't hold on any longer, took all the company's cash flow, and left the partnership, just as my company was going bankrupt. There really was a girl who, after being picked up by Ethan Santos, became his girlfriend overnight. In the end, she even married into the Santos family because of it, transforming from a poor little flower into a wealthy socialite. Julia found me and said that should have been her life, and I had completely ruined it. Ethan Santos hinted to her that he was interested in me, and as long as she delivered me to him, he would help Julia get introduced to a rich second-generation boyfriend. Without hesitation, Julia got me drunk and pushed me into Ethan Santos's arms. I was tormented and defiled by several demons, who took intimate photos to threaten me into becoming their captive. Julia, still unsatisfied, lured me to the mountain, pushed me off the cliff, and took off with the remaining money after the company went bankrupt. Only after death did I realize that was her karma, which I had brought upon myself by interfering. Given a second chance at life, I decided not to meddle in her plan to marry into wealth anymore. In fact, I would even give her a push forward. I'm curious to see what will happen when Julia truly becomes the blind box that gets opened. Will it really go as she wishes, fulfilling her dream of marrying into a wealthy family? Without waiting for Julia to urge me, I put on that eye-catching red and green dress. Instead, she stood there stunned for a long time, then asked again, "Are you sure you want to wear this? In my previous life, I didn't wear this outfit to be her foil as she wished. Instead, I chose a simple white dress that I often wore, but my fair skin made me look delicate and charming under the dim bar lights, which caught Ethan Santos's attention. This time, I decided to go all the way and clear the stage for Julia to put on her show. I dragged Julia straight toward the direction of the bar, and as I closed the door, I made sure to stuff the contract into my bag. By the time we arrived, the drinking session had already entered its second half. Many small company owners, who shared the same idea as us, were lined up on the side, flattering young Master Santos, but he was scanning the crowd with little interest, as if he had grown tired of these amusements. Julia walked straight up to Ethan Santos with the imported liquor in hand. "Mr. Santos, I arrived late, so I'll start by punishing myself with 3 drinks." Julia downed 3 large glasses of imported liquor in a row, her face immediately flushing red. "Hey, who are you? Do you know this bottle cost 68,000? Did anyone say you could drink it? You're not just here to mooch drinks, are you?" The lackey beside Ethan Santos shouted loudly. Julia froze for a moment, then pretended not to hear as if she couldn't handle the alcohol, and threw herself into Ethan Santos's arms. Unexpectedly, Ethan Santos dodged to the side, causing Julia to fall flat on her face. "Mr. Santos." Julia's figure was scorching hot, and after just a few moves, she was already revealing a glimpse of spring. She moaned at Ethan Santos's feet, the borrowed stockings now completely exposed. Ethan Santos stopped the person beside him from trying to drag Julia away, speaking with great interest. "Are you also here to discuss a partnership with me?" Julia took the opportunity to climb onto Ethan Santos's lap, snuggling up close to him just like that. "Of course, it's because I admire your talent, Mr. Santos, that I've fallen at the feet of your suit pants." Everyone couldn't help but burst into laughter. In truth, there are plenty of gold diggers, but one so blatant and without any pretense is truly rare. I quickly stepped forward. "Mr. Santos, she's drunk and talking nonsense. This is our company's contract. I heard that Santos Group hasn't signed the advertising contract for Daily Chemical Products next quarter yet. I hope you can give us a chance." I handed the contract and pen to Ethan Santos. "Damn, she actually brought the contract here. Why didn't I think of that? Quick, call the assistant and have our contract sent over immediately." The crowd erupted, beginning to boil over. Ethan Santos couldn't help but look me up and down, his brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. "This, Miss Carrot. It's not so easy to get an order from me. If you can finish this bottle of strong liquor, I might consider it." His eyes gleamed with a sharp light, like a leopard that has spotted its prey. In my previous life, when I held a broken bottle to his face, he looked exactly the same. It was as if I were already a piece of meat on the chopping board, to be kneaded and shaped at his will. Suppressing my fear, I noticed Julia staring intently at me. A thought crossed my mind, and I drank half a glass of wine. As if choked, I coughed repeatedly, muttering under my breath, "Ugh, my head is so dizzy." I also fell into Ethan Santos's arms. Another shameless gold digger. I thought she carried the contract with her because she was career-driven. Turns out the contract was just an excuse. What she really wants is to climb the social ladder. Whispers rippled through the crowd once more. Julia's expression instantly changed as she snatched the wine bottle from my hand. "Mr. Santos, she and I are from the same company. I'll drink this for her." Without bothering with a glass, Julia tilted her head back and began gulping down the strong liquor. I was almost ready to cheer on the sidelines. I never expected her to go to such lengths just to climb the social ladder by marrying Ethan Santos into a wealthy family. This was a strong liquor with over 60% alcohol content. Drinking it like this, a stomach perforation would be letting her off easy. I watched coldly as Julia downed the entire bottle. She finally stopped pretending to be drunk and leaning on Ethan Santos, instead lying completely motionless on the ground, truly becoming someone who could be picked up like a corpse. Yet I didn't go to help her up, instead pushing the contract once more toward Ethan Santos. "President Santos, with so many people watching, you must keep your word. A quarter's worth of advertising orders is a small matter. But if it costs the young Master Santos his dignity, that would be a loss far outweighing the gain." Ethan Santos sneered and signed his name with a flourish, not even bothering to look. I quickly tucked the contract into my bag and was about to get up to leave when I turned back to look at the booth. Ethan Santos nudged Julia, who was at his feet, toward me. I extended my hand toward him. "Mr. Santos, the pen." While Ethan Santos was still in a daze, I pulled my pen from his hand, capped it, and put it in my bag. This was my limited edition Conan pen. I couldn't let it fall into the hands of a beast. Without even glancing at Julia lying on the ground, I walked straight out of that trouble-filled place, but I didn't go far. I watched from a corner at the street intersection. Before long, people in the bar began to leave in small groups. After all, the fruit had already been picked by me, and those who shared the same purpose as me, seeing no profit to be gained, dispersed as well. Finally, it was Ethan Santos and a few elegantly dressed young gentlemen, followed by Julia being carried by bodyguards. I followed their group to a 5-star hotel, watching them enter the presidential suite on the top floor. That night, without my interference, Julia successfully took the first step in her plan to enter the wealthy circle. I pulled out a thick envelope and gave it to the hotel security, successfully obtaining the surveillance footage of Julia being carried into the room. For several days in a row, there was no news from Julia. Just as I was overwhelmed with work on the advertising campaign for the Santos Group, she came to me in tears. "Summer, what should I do? Ethan Santos has ruined me." That night, he got me drunk and took me away, and then he actually had several people with him. They even took photos of me. They said if I don't obey their training in the future, they'll spread my photos all over the internet. I kept revising the proposal in my hands without looking up. What did Ethan Santos say? I reminded her. Julia's tear-stained face immediately flushed with a rosy hue. He was actually quite protective of me, and even said that if I got pregnant, he would take responsibility for me. Honestly, all of them are well-known rich kids. I wouldn't lose out no matter which one I end up with, but if I had to choose, I'd definitely pick Ethan Santos. His family is the wealthiest, and he's the best looking. In my previous life, Julia drugged me with sleeping pills and delivered me to the bed of Ethan Santos and his group. When I woke up, consumed by despair and wanting to take Julia down with me, she signaled Ethan Santos's bodyguards to seize me. My eyes were wide with fury as I glared at her, but she just flicked her freshly manicured nails and sneered contemptuously. "You got your share of fun too, didn't you? Besides, these guys are all rich second-generation heirs. You'd be set for life with any one of them. If you hadn't stuck your nose where it didn't belong, Ethan Santos wouldn't have lost his chance to that bitch." Rich kids are all about the thrill. I finally got my chance to be picked up after a night out, and you had to ruin it. You think you're the only one with integrity. Let me tell you, those intimate photos of you have been passed around to everyone. The former campus belle of S University has become a woman for all to ride. How many pure-hearted men have had their dreams shattered into pieces, in the end, because her boyfriend was merely a lackey beside Ethan Santos, and Ethan Santos still couldn't forget me. She grew even more jealous and resentful of me, luring me deep into the mountains with the promise of returning my private photos. She raised her hand and pushed me off the cliff. I lifted my head from the proposal and stared at Julia. "So, you need to make good use of Ethan Santos's affection for you and keep him close. If you get pregnant, it's the perfect opportunity to move up and become Mrs. Santos. In my previous life, I only found out after my death that the Mrs. Santos who was married into the family because of her pregnancy disappeared without a trace after the wedding. It wasn't until much later that her body was found in a shallow bay, her limbs gone and her remains reduced to bones. Julia only saw the glamour of marrying into a wealthy family, but she had no idea that these scumbags, worse than beasts, had long regarded human life as worthless. How could they ever be willing to be controlled by a pregnant belly? A gleam of excitement flickered in Julia's eyes. "Summer, you really have a way with things. Once I marry Ethan Santos, I'll definitely find one of his friends to pair you up with." What nonsense is this, trying to play matchmaker with me like some cheap romance novel? I watched Julia sway her hips and walk away seductively, but I couldn't afford to dwell on that. Having been reborn, I was determined to take control of my own destiny. Perhaps I couldn't yet compete with the Santos Group, but a company rotten to its core was the perfect stepping stone for my ascent. I worked day and night on the proposal, determined to use this opportunity to showcase our company's capabilities to everyone. By the time Julia came to find me again, I could hardly recognize her. She was wrapped from head to toe in luxury goods, standing before me with an air of haughty pride. "How about it? Envious, aren't you?" She spun around in front of me, swaying gracefully with every movement. To be honest, Julia's looks are actually quite decent, but those flashy big logos and that gaudy, chunky gold necklace really drag her appearance down a few notches. I smiled without saying a word, waiting for her to show off the latest Chanel bag in her hand before coolly dropping a reminder. "When's the wedding date? I'll be sure to prepare a red envelope for you." Julia immediately deflated like a punctured balloon, slumping back into her chair. "Summer, could you help me come up with another idea? Although Ethan Santos dotes on me a lot and gave me a black card to spend as I please, He just won't allow me to publicly announce that I'm his girlfriend." She looked anxious, constantly stomping her feet. Ignoring her, I just frowned and said, "Julia, you haven't been coming to the company lately. I'm planning to hire a few people. We agreed when we first started the business that if anyone didn't show up for work for 2 consecutive weeks, they would resign and leave." I never intended to partner with Julia when we first started the business. But she insisted on teaming up with me, believing that having the title of a female entrepreneur would help her attract wealthy men. At the time, I was short on funds and had no choice but to accept her, but I also set rules to keep her in check. If she chooses to break the partnership now, according to our agreement, she can only take half of the company's cash flow, and almost all of the money has already been invested in production, in her previous life. She blamed me for saving her from Ethan Santos's grasp, causing her to miss out on marrying into a wealthy family, and for taking all the cash flow when the company was at its most difficult. Now I've planned ahead early, leaving only $2,000 in the account. Julia, however, looked completely indifferent, curling her lips. "This isn't even enough for me to buy a Meow Meow hair clip, but right now, what I lack the least is money. Consider this a reward for you." I insisted that she sign the dissolution agreement and transferred the full 1052 yuan into her account. In this life, I will spread my wings and soar, never again allowing her the possibility of holding me back. At my signal, she accepted the payment and then eagerly urged me to give her advice. After expressing my helplessness, I subtly reminded her, "Julia, I remember we both had our periods last month. My stomach hurts so much. Do you have any painkillers with you?" I groaned in pain. Clutching my stomach, Julia's eyes immediately lit up. "I can't believe I didn't think of that. I'll go to the pharmacy right now." After she left, I quietly took painkillers from the drawer and swallowed them, not expecting her to return. She used to suffer from worse menstrual cramps than I did. Just now, she was holding an iced Americano, which could only mean she might be pregnant. She must have gone to the pharmacy to buy a pregnancy test. Julia indeed never returned. And I could only keep up with her recent life through her social media updates. She posted a photo of a pregnancy test showing 2 lines, alongside a bed full of luxury goods. "Thanks to the soon-to-be dad for the rewards, both baby and I are being good." In the corner of the photo was Ethan Santos's hand, wearing an IWC watch. These rich second-generation heirs may have money to play around with, but if they were to date a woman of unknown background, they would face economic sanctions from their families. Only Ethan Santos's family was different. His father was a man who married into the family and relied on his wife's wealth, not daring to cause trouble. As the only son in the family, Ethan Santos had been a little troublemaker since childhood. Julia had just been diagnosed as pregnant, and it was still too early to know the baby's gender. Ethan Santos could only acknowledge her as his girlfriend, coaxing her into keeping the child. I glanced at the phone before turning it off and submitted the 3rd version of the proposal to the Santos Group, which was finally approved. Since I had already invested all my money into the channels, I was ready to start operations as soon as the proposal was approved. However, when I went for an on-site inspection, I found that the hygiene standards of the Santos family's production line were completely subpar, with flies and insects swarming and crawling everywhere. Moreover, their high-end skin care products were simply ordinary daily chemical products mixed with fragrances and directly bottled. Without making a sound, I recorded everything one by one using a specially designed water cup camera. With the extraordinary success of this advertisement, my company gained significant fame and continuously received new orders. When given the opportunity to select clients, I declined to renew the contract with the Santos Group. Julia was unaware of all this, posting daily on various platforms about receiving daddy-to-be's treats. She fully embraced the persona of a pampered wife, even changing her nickname to thin-skinned, big-filling little pregnant lady. But every time she hinted to Ethan Santos that she wanted to get married, he would give her the cold shoulder for a long time. After this happened several times, Julia finally couldn't bear the anxiety and kept calling me, begging me to think of another solution for her. I could only say I was powerless to help, and later I simply blocked and deleted her number. Just as I was at the Santos Group to collect the final payment, Julia cornered me. "Summer, what do you mean by this? How dare you block me? Do you even realize that with just a snap of my fingers, you won't be able to land a single order from the Santos Group ever again?" I didn't tell her that I was the one who decided to stop working with the Santos Group. "What, have you become Mrs. Santos now?" I looked at her with amusement. The people in the company couldn't help but cover their mouths and snicker. Earlier, I had overheard the finance manager, with a look of disdain, complaining about Julia. "What a disgrace to us women. coming here every day to block Mr. Santos, claiming he abandoned her after taking advantage. That night, there were 7 people in total. If Ethan Santos had the misfortune of being the one, he might reluctantly keep the child for the sake of the 60 million compensation for wearing the green hat, but if he were to swallow this bitter pill of a green pasture and marry Julia, that would be absolutely impossible. Julia, still blissfully unaware, dreams of rising through motherhood to become a wealthy wife. I shrugged indifferently. This was already my last collaboration with the Santos Group anyway, forgot to mention. My company has been swamped with orders lately, and we've stopped taking skincare ad campaigns. The Santos Group has almost monopolized this industry. The video in my hands is a ticking time bomb. I don't want to get caught in the blast when it eventually goes off. Julia pursed her lips and let me go. Summer, as a woman, you shouldn't push yourself too hard. Finding a good husband to marry early is the right path, just like me. I acted as if I hadn't heard and walked straight away. Unexpectedly, that evening, I received a distress call from Julia, who had changed her phone number. Summer, Ethan Santos kicked me in the stomach, and I'm bleeding. I didn't want to go at first, but thinking about the cruel torment Julia put me through in my past life, I decided to go see her miserable state. When I arrived at the hospital, Ethan Santos and a few other playboys were in the ward, smoking and discussing something. Santos, that's not how it works. You made a bet. And you have to accept the outcome. The amniocentesis test has already confirmed the child is yours. You don't want to raise a child, that's why you want Julia to have an abortion, isn't it? Ethan Santos lowered his head with a gloomy expression, his gaze toward Julia dark and inscrutable. Julia, disregarding her own body that had nearly miscarried, knelt at Ethan Santos's feet. Darling, I was drunk that time. I really don't remember anything. The only one I love is you, please. For the sake of the child, forgive me. I promise to cut ties with other men from now on and never see them again. Ethan Santos's expression softened slightly as he slowly spoke. Don't overthink it, just focus on giving birth to the child safely, but if you dare mention marriage to me again, I'll make both you and the child in your belly disappear. His tone was icy cold, and even I, standing outside the door, could feel the chill, thinking of the pregnant Mrs. Santos from my previous life, whose limbs had been severed. I couldn't help but shudder. I only entered after they had left. Julia stared at me with a vacant gaze. Summer, do I really not have the fate of being a wealthy man's wife? I reached out and gently touched her face. How could that be? Ethan Santos is still young, thinking he'll have many more children in the future, which is why he doesn't value the one in your belly. But what if, in this lifetime, he could only have this one child? Do you think he would treat you like a goddess? Julia's fighting spirit was reignited. By then, let's see if he still dares to push me. I pretended to comfort her a few more times, telling her about a type of estrogen that, if taken by men, would cause impotence. My ex-boyfriend took it every day to come out of the closet, and his skin became fair and glowing. Julia looked at me suspiciously. I'm with you every day. How come I never knew you had a boyfriend before? I made something up out of thin air and quickly changed the subject to brush it off. I told her that the end of this month is the mid-year meeting of the Santos Group. Julia was determined. I must seize this opportunity and climb the ladder successfully. Leaving the hospital, I breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't tell Julia that this year-end conference was the occasion for the Santos Group to announce the marriage alliance between Ethan Santos and the Liu family's daughter. In my previous life, that girl was quite forbearing. After the paternity test, she quietly stayed in the villa where Ethan Santos kept her, crying her eyes out every day. She would secretly post some WeChat moments visible only to Ethan Santos, pouring out her sorrows and heartfelt feelings. It just so happened that the Liu family's daughter was known throughout the circle for being both unattractive and promiscuous, to rebel against his family's arrangement. Ethan Santos directly took his household registration booklet and married the girl. Ethan Santos's mother felt sorry for him and used a year's worth of company profits to quell the Liu family's anger and settle the matter. But Julia never had such cunning. All she knew was how to force her way to the top. On the day of the year-end conference, I was also invited as a former collaborator. I arrived early at the venue and saw the hotel entrance already adorned with photos of Ethan Santos and the Liu family's daughter, the perfect match between the Santos family's young master and the Liu family's heiress. The large characters on the banner were particularly eye-catching. Julia, supporting her pregnant belly, stared fixedly at that poster. Miss, please show your invitation card. The security guard at the entrance dutifully stopped Julia. I quickly stepped forward. She's with me. I presented the invitation and smoothly brought Julia into the hotel. Julia broke free from my hand and headed straight for the center of the stage. Ethan Santos looked at his mother's speech with impatience, keeping half a meter away from the Liu family's heiress beside him. He was indeed dissatisfied with being arranged by his family, but when his gaze swept over Julia in the audience, his eyes held a threat. Signaling her to leave quickly, Julia rushed forward in a flash, snatched the microphone from Mrs. Santos's hand, and said to the camera, "I am Ethan Santos's girlfriend, and I am carrying the Santos family's only grandson in my belly." Santos's mother furrowed her brow tightly, signaling to Ethan Santos with her eyes to quickly get rid of Julia. Such unsavory affairs were not uncommon in wealthy families, but today's Santos's mother had specifically invited half the city's prominent media outlets, and she couldn't let it all be ruined by a small-time troublemaker like Julia. Julia, with her arm restrained by Ethan Santos, was about to be escorted out of the venue, yet she let out a wild, unrestrained laugh. "Ethan Santos, don't you feel like you've lost interest in women lately?" The reporters below caught a whiff of gossip and quickly swarmed around the two of them. Ethan Santos's face darkened as he threatened, "What have you done to me?" Julia laughed even louder, turning to the Liu family's young lady on the stage and saying, "If Miss Liu doesn't mind having a eunuch for a husband in the future, then go ahead and marry into the family. However, the child in my belly is the only grandson of the Santos family. Once he inherits the Santos family in the future, you'll have to live under my thumb." The Liu family's young lady, in a fit of anger, declared the marriage off and left the venue. Ethan Santos slapped Julia across the face, knocking her to the ground. Julia looked at Ethan Santos in disbelief. "Everything I said is true. Last time you were drunk, I gave you a large dose of estrogen. From now on, you can never have another woman. I don't mind you. As long as you marry me, I will still love you as I said I would from the beginning." Ethan Santos sneered. "You don't really think you can control me with just that, do you? I'm telling you. Estrogen is metabolized in just 1 year, not to mention we have a professional medical team at home. You think you can hold me hostage just because you're carrying my child? Let's see what you'll use to threaten me once that child is gone." Ethan Santos kicked hard at Julia's stomach, grinding his black leather shoe repeatedly against her belly. Julia screamed in agony, and before long, a large amount of blood began to seep out from beneath her. Santos's mother pulled Ethan Santos back, whispering a warning, "Don't go too far, today is full of media reporters." Julia had a moment to catch her breath, yet she stood there frozen, clutching her stomach. In an instant, her gaze turned sinister as she stared at Ethan Santos's crotch. I had been watching her closely and clearly saw a cold glint flash behind her. A dagger sliced through Ethan Santos's pants. Ethan Santos let out a deafening scream, clutching his groin and curling up on the ground. By the time Santos's mother shouted for someone to restrain Julia, Julia was already smiling, blood staining the corner of her mouth. "Now, the child in my belly is the only grandson of the Santos family, right?" Mrs. Santos, looking flustered, pointed a trembling finger at Julia. "You lunatic." Ethan Santos was rushed to the hospital, but it was beyond saving. However, Julia's clever plan backfired. She had a miscarriage, last time at the hospital. The doctor had already instructed her to strictly stay in bed. Julia held her deflated belly, sobbing uncontrollably. "Without the child, how can I still become Mrs. Santos?" I thought she was grieving for her own child, but it turns out she was crying over her shattered dream of marrying into a wealthy family. I thought this ill-fated relationship had come to an end, so I didn't pay any more attention to it. Just as the company had doubled in size and I was preparing to open a branch, I received Julia's invitation, "The wedding of Ethan Santos and Julia. Your presence is requested." I suddenly felt like the world was one big, chaotic mess. I still remember last time at the hospital, when Ethan Santos found out he had become a eunuch thanks to Julia. His eyes turned bloodshot as he wanted to kill her to vent his hatred. Now they're actually going to hold a wedding. On the wedding invitation, the two are gazing into each other's eyes in their wedding photos, seemingly affectionate, without a hint of anything unusual, as if they were truly a couple who had been in love for many years. I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. After asking around extensively, I finally learned from one of Ethan Santos's former followers, the Santos family had spent a fortune to cover up the fact that Ethan Santos was impotent, but the social circle of the elite was only so large, and people still whispered about it, looking at Ethan Santos with strange eyes. Santos's mother then found Julia and had her marry Ethan Santos to cover up the truth. Julia had originally thought she would never have a chance to marry into a wealthy family in this lifetime, but unexpectedly, the situation took a turn, and she agreed without hesitation. Two people, each with their own needs, ended up together like this. I took 200 yuan, gave it as a wedding gift, and went to join the wedding banquet. On stage, Ethan Santos gritted his teeth and said with deep affection, I always feel the hotel air conditioning is set too cold." After the wedding, Julia's social media feed started updating again, adorned with limited edition bags and various jewelry. She stood in the center of the photos, looking every bit the wealthy socialite, but I sensed something amiss in her vacant gaze. This was nothing like her. The old Julia would have struck a pose and taken a 9-square grid of photos even if she bought a knockoff. But now she seemed more like a prop the Santos family used to keep up appearances. At a business gathering, Ethan Santos attended with his new wife on his arm. I watched Julia being controlled by Ethan Santos's gaze like a marionette on strings. It wasn't until Ethan Santos was entangled by a few playboys drinking that Julia, holding a wine glass, waited in the garden. I approached her without a sound. "Congratulations. You've finally achieved your long-cherished wish." Julia seemed startled. But upon seeing it was me, a glimmer of hope shone in her eyes. "Summer, save me. My life in the Santos family is worse than that of a dog. When they eat, I have to kneel beside them to serve the dishes. The slightest disobedience results in an electric shock. You never gave me enough to eat normally, and you even took me to a psychiatric hospital, prescribing large amounts of antidepressants. If I didn't leave, I would have died." I sneered mockingly. "Now you wear gold and jade every day. Isn't this exactly the life you wanted? In my previous life, I saved her from the jaws of danger, only to face retaliation from Ethan Santos. Instead, she blamed me for hindering her steps into a wealthy family. Now, she is begging me to save her from that wealthy family." Originally, seeing her become Ethan Santos's plaything, I felt quite pleased. But thinking of everything she and Ethan Santos did to me in my previous life, I clenched my fists tightly again. Before I left, I gave her an old phone. Inside was the hotel surveillance footage from the first time she was picked up. At the time, the security guard, seeing how generous I was, extorted another 20,000 from me and told me he had installed a pinhole camera in the suite. Rich people play wild. It's more thrilling than watching a cheap movie. I walked past Julia. "Only the police can save you now." After I left, Julia called the police. The police arrived quickly and arrested Ethan Santos and a group of rich second-generation heirs around him on charges of rape. Although the video provided by Julia could not be used as courtroom evidence, those lackeys couldn't withstand intimidation. They hadn't planned in advance and were caught off guard. Their testimonies were full of holes. And in the end, they all told the truth. They confessed that the whole thing was Ethan Santos's idea, and it was Ethan Santos's bodyguards who delivered the person to the hotel. Ethan Santos was found guilty and, due to the severity of the circumstances, was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Santos's mother nearly exhausted half of the Santos Group's resources trying to pull strings. Yet she still couldn't get his sentence reduced. After Ethan Santos was arrested, Julia came to find me. "Summer. Thank you for saving me despite our past grievances." I sneered coldly. "You're thanking me too soon." She didn't understand, and I didn't explain further. In my previous life, Ethan Santos held a grudge against me just because I threatened him with a wine bottle, and he tortured me repeatedly. Now that he's been tricked by Julia like this, he definitely won't let it go. Sure enough, at the celebration banquet after I signed the contract, I heard the follow-up news. Ethan Santos hired a professional legal team and applied for medical parole on the grounds of needing treatment for a heart condition, but during his treatment at the hospital, he attacked a doctor and escaped. He found Julia and used a chainsaw to amputate all 4 of her limbs. In this life, he did not hide the body and throw it into the sea. Instead, he directly dragged Julia's half-corpse with a rope and threw it near the wild dog's den. By the time the police arrived with guns, Ethan Santos had already gone mad. "It was this woman who ruined me. Even if I die, I'll make sure she goes to the King of Hell's palace first to scout the way for me." He was covered in blood, laughing maniacally, just as he was swinging the knife, continuing to slash at the already dying Julia. He was shot dead on the spot. Just when I thought the dust had settled, my company was reported. In recent years, the Santos Group has firmly held a monopoly position in the skincare industry. Accustomed to acting with arrogance, they take all the meat and don't even leave a sip of soup for other companies. They had long been a thorn in the side of many companies. This incident with Ethan Santos dealt a heavy blow to the Santos Group. As the wall crumbles, everyone pushes. The corner cutting and substituting inferior materials were exposed one by one, and the fact that my company had once handled their advertising and promotion was also brought to light. The company was originally on the verge of going public, but now the materials submitted to the stock exchange have been rejected. I immediately held a press conference to admit my mistakes, and made the evidence collected at that time public. Before this, other companies had only made some speculative remarks about the Santos Group. Now, with factual evidence in hand, it was the perfect opportunity to strike while the iron was hot. They all seized the chance to hammer the Santos Group hard and no longer focused on me. The Santos Group collapsed like a tree falling and monkeys scattering, and soon went bankrupt, yet I voluntarily took out all the profits from that initial order and donated them to charity. The company's reputation gradually recovered, and the shareholders' complaints diminished significantly. Let's take advantage of this year to build up our corporate culture and foundation, so that when the next opportunity for going public arises, we can be more confident. I spoke passionately at the shareholders' meeting. I never thought I would see Julia alive again. The last time, the social news of her being dragged by Ethan Santos with half her body had spread across all video websites. When I saw Julia's tightly closed eyes on the screen, I thought she had died on the spot. Who would have thought? On the day my company went public, after the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I actually found the beggar across the street somewhat familiar. She had lost all her limbs and was holding a stainless steel bowl in her mouth, repeatedly kowtowing to passers-by. I focused my gaze and saw her gaunt face ashen as death, yet her belly was swollen high. Indeed, even though she had lost her limbs, in the eyes of those homeless men, she still possessed the most basic function for them to vent their desires. Perhaps I had been staring at her for too long. As she seemed to sense something and struggled to lift her head, the moment our eyes met, I clearly saw jealousy, resentment, and self-doubt in her gaze, everything but guilt. I withdrew my gaze and raised my glass to the business elites who had come to offer their congratulations. As the grand feast drew to a close and I prepared to leave by car, I unexpectedly saw Julia crawling at the entrance of the company. Summer, you could have saved me, so why didn't you rescue me in this life? Her eyes were filled with hatred, so she also had memories of her past life, yet even in her destitution, she hadn't changed one bit, only remembering that I didn't save her, never considering how she repaid my kindness with betrayal in her previous life. I didn't want to waste a single word on her. As she lunged for my pant leg, I stepped into the car and avoided her. Julia's lunge met empty air. Without her hands and feet to support her, her round belly hit the ground face first. From the rearview mirror, I could see a large pool of blood spreading beneath her in the distance, yet no one stepped forward to take a look. I closed the car window, shutting her, along with the memories of my past life, outside of my existence. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. My mom is pregnant with a baby brother. During a hospital checkup, it was discovered that this baby brother has XYY syndrome, and everyone urged my mom to terminate the pregnancy. My mom cried and refused to give up. I asked her what XYY syndrome was. My mom said to me, "It means your brother is the manliest of men. He will protect his big sister." I seemed to understand, yet not fully, until the year my brother turned 7, when he picked up a brick and smashed it against my mother's head again and again. I think I finally understood what it means to be a real man. The year I was 6, my mother became pregnant. When the months passed, they secretly paid someone to have a checkup. Upon learning it was a boy, my mother was overjoyed. Although my dad always said having a thoughtful little daughter like me was enough, having a son was my mom's long-held wish. Everything changed after my mom's amniocentesis results came out. They said my unborn brother had XYY chromosomes, that is, the so-called super male child. I was eavesdropping outside the door, and my dad was earnestly trying to persuade my mom to give up. Let it go. We already have Jenny. The doctor said this kind of child will have strong antisocial tendencies in the future. We can't raise them. My mom, tears streaming down her face, shook her head and covered her stomach with both hands. No, I can't bear to. Look, the baby is already so big. Are you going to end your child's life just because of one sentence from the doctor? My dad hesitated, his brows furrowed deeply. My mom said firmly, "Didn't we raise Jenny well? I believe this child can be raised well too, as long as we educate them properly." My father was left speechless with anger by her and went alone to the balcony to smoke, leaving only my mother with red-rimmed eyes, crying. I moved closer and asked, "Mom, what does supermasculine mean?" My mother looked at me sadly, thought for a moment, and said, "It means your brother is the manliest of men. He will protect his sister." I hesitated and asked, "Then will you only love him and not me?" My mother stroked my head. "How could that be? You are the one I love most." I laughed, A few months later, my younger brother was born. Everyone who saw my brother praised him for his beauty. Big eyes, fair skin, like an angel baby from a picture book. Whenever someone praised my brother, my mother would be filled with pride, saying, "How could such an adorable baby be violent? She will love her brother for a lifetime." Under the loving protection of their mother, the brother slowly grew up, babbling with a sweet, childish voice, and began to express his emotions as well. However, the way he expresses his emotions is a bit different from other children. If he doesn't like the carefully prepared complimentary food, he will simply knock it to the ground. The electric toy car ran out of battery and stopped moving, which also made him furious. He stomped and smashed the toy car on the floor, and he would only be happy when the toy was completely destroyed. He had an extremely strong desire to destroy things. Toys at home never survived until the next day. After destroying toys, he would move on to other things, as if destruction brought him endless joy. No matter how his father tried to discipline him, it was useless. While his mother practiced encouraging education, "Baby, you're amazing, our baby is so strong." I felt a bit wronged and complained to my mother, "Why do you hit me when I break things?" "But you never hit my brother," Mom sighed. "It's different with your brother, we can only guide him gently." "Jenny, as the older sister, you need to be sensible." I didn't understand. This is clearly favoritism. To cultivate my brother's gentle nature, Mom bought each of us a pet rabbit. Mom said with a smile, "Be good to the rabbit, it's a life too." My younger brother stroked the rabbit's ears, nodding with great affection and reluctance to let go. The next day, when my mother went to change the vegetable leaves for the rabbit, she let out a scream. I rushed into the balcony to look, and the rabbit my brother had raised was already dead, gutted with its intestines spilled into the cage. Meanwhile, my rabbits in the cage huddled with their ears tucked back. Trembling in the corner, the younger brother stood behind his mother, smiling and asking her to hold him. "Mom, I want another little rabbit." Holding the rabbit in my arms, I couldn't help but shiver. Ever since my brother was born, all of my parents' energy has been focused on him. Even my grandmother came specifically to take care of him. He became the center of attention for our entire family. It must be said that he usually looks no different from other little boys, with a sweet smile, a love for snacks, and a fondness for watching cartoons. But this sunny and cheerful boy could turn into a devil in the next second. When my grandmother simply wouldn't let him have a snack, he bit down hard on her arm and wouldn't let go, like a jackal, refusing to release his grip no matter who tried to pull him away. I was just watching cartoons when, as my mother carried him to the balcony, he casually grabbed the remote control and hurled it at my head. Blood streamed down from my forehead, and he flashed a delighted smile. Finally, when it was time for kindergarten, my parents spent a lot of effort and money to find a daycare for my brother that focused on early childhood mental health development. But not long after, the teacher called and asked my parents to come over. The reason was that an older child in the big class had bullied him, mocking him for being thin and small. He had learned it from somewhere. During nap time, while the teacher went to the restroom, he sneaked into the big class's nap room, used a lighter to set the bed sheets on fire, then quickly ran out and locked the door. If the teacher hadn't returned in time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The teacher was astonished. "Does your child often watch violent cartoons? I've never seen a child like this before. This is just too frightening." At the request of the other parents, my brother was withdrawn from school. My parents had to bow repeatedly, apologize, and pay compensation before the matter was settled. My brother stood by, biting his fingers as he watched my parents bow and apologize, a playful grin on his face. The teacher asked him what he was laughing about. My brother said, "I want to set all of you on fire." My father's face turned pale, and he slapped my brother in front of everyone, knocking him to the ground. He wailed loudly, while the onlookers watched coldly. Only my mother rushed over and hugged my brother. "It's all my fault. I'm sorry." My father and mother had a huge argument. My dad roared in the room, "We shouldn't have kept him. He's a monster." My mom pointed at his nose and screamed hysterically, "Even if he's a monster, he's your seed, and he's already been born. What's the point of telling me this now?" My dad wanted to argue but couldn't find the words, leaving my mom to cry alone. My mom went to great lengths to send my brother to another kindergarten, but he either bullied little girls by cutting off their braids or picked on younger children, forcing their heads into the toilet to drink the water. Seeing the pregnant female teacher with her 7-month belly, my brother actually told others that he wanted to kick her stomach hard. Later, my brother actually did it. When the female teacher was about to go to the restroom, he tripped her by surprise. The female teacher lost her balance and fell forward. If someone nearby hadn't reacted quickly and stopped her, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The female teacher's husband caused a huge scene, demanding that the kindergarten compensate for emotional damages and questioning why my brother, at such a young age, could be so malicious. The principal had no choice but to refund our money, practically begging my mom, "Please take your child away. Our kindergarten is too small to accommodate such a distinguished guest." In my 30 years of running this place, I've never seen a child like this. My parents tried both gentle persuasion and strict discipline, but nothing worked. In the end, my mom gave up and simply let my grandmother take care of my brother at home until he reached school age. As the only eldest grandson in the family, my grandmother doted on my brother, giving him whatever he wanted. Because of her age and poor leg mobility, my grandmother finds it difficult to go up and down the stairs. Even so, she goes to the market every day to buy the dishes my brother loves to eat, never tiring of it. Who would have thought that on this day? Just as my grandmother had gone out to buy groceries and reached the stairwell, I saw my brother rush out with his game console in hand. Completely absorbed in it, not even bothering to avoid the grandmother in front of him, the vegetable basket tumbled down to the next flight of stairs, followed by the sound of my grandmother's body rolling down. My brother didn't even bother to check on his fallen grandmother. Instead, he continued playing with his game console, his laughter echoing throughout the stairwell. I saw all of this with my own eyes. From then on, my grandmother was paralyzed. My father slapped my brother like a madman. Wishing he could kill him, my mother cried and hugged his leg, shouting, "He's just a child." My father screamed frantically, "This isn't a child, this is a monster." He slumped in the chair, muttering to himself, "It would have been better to abort. It would have been better to abort back then." My brother glared at him with hatred, but only I walked over to my father's side. I tried to comfort him, telling him not to be sad, that grandma would get better. My father suddenly hugged me, tears streaming down his face. After returning home from the hospital, I was in a good mood, humming a tune as I fed my rabbit some greens. My poor rabbit was still traumatized by the death of its companion. Trembling at the sight of people, I pushed the vegetables to his mouth. "Eat." The rabbit didn't open its mouth. "Why aren't you eating?" Finally, I opened the cage and saw with my own eyes that the vegetables went into the rabbit's stomach. Only then did I leave satisfied. After Grandma became paralyzed, there was one more person in the family who needed care. To avoid any accidents, Mom quit her job to take care of my younger brother and Grandma at home. No one knows why my brother pushed Grandma, but according to him, he thought it was fun. He has always been like this, finding amusement in others' misfortune. His happiness only feels real when it is built on the suffering of others. Ever since being betrayed by her dear grandson, Grandma has completely changed her temperament. She no longer speaks to my brother and has instead come to realize my worth. Whenever there is something delicious, she always calls me over and saves it for me, but she never shows my brother even a hint of kindness. After catching her talking to me and handing me snacks several times, my brother would glare at us with a dark, resentful look in his eyes. "What are you guys doing?" We remained silent and didn't answer. So he turned around to watch cartoons, and I breathed a sigh of relief. From then on, my younger brother became very willful and no longer cared about the feelings of others in the family. If he wasn't allowed to go outside to set off firecrackers and play, he would just play with firecrackers at home. To prevent him from causing a fire at home due to his willfulness, my mother confiscated all his toys and firecrackers. Until one day not long after, Grandma was taking a nap, and my mom and I went to the supermarket to buy some things. Mom instructed my younger brother, "Don't go near the kitchen, stay at home and wait for us to come back, understand?" My younger brother smiled sweetly and agreed. An hour later, when we returned and opened the door, we immediately smelled smoke. Mother was shocked and hurriedly opened the door, only to find the room filled with smoke. Mother frantically called out my younger brother's name. He was in the room, completely unharmed. But when I went to look for Grandma, I discovered that the smoke was coming from her room. Grandma was still lying in bed, covering my nose. I shouted, "Grandma, Grandma, get up quickly." Grandma didn't respond to me. I called out several more times, and this time my mother came over. She shook Grandma, saying, "Mom, Mom, what's wrong with you, Mom?" Grandma remained completely silent. As the smoke cleared, I faintly saw that her lips had turned purple. My mother trembled as she reached out to check Grandma's breathing. 2 seconds later, she let out a loud cry and collapsed onto the floor. Grandma had passed away. Soon, police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks surrounded my house, leaving no room to pass. The paramedics covered my grandmother's body with a white cloth. While the firefighters looked at the scattered firecracker paper all over the living room on the first floor and let out a long sigh, the firefighter said to the police officer, "It is preliminarily determined that the child was playing with firecrackers indoors, and the elderly person was in a state of sleep at the time. After being frightened, they suffered a sudden heart attack." The police officer frowned and said to my mother, "Leaving the child alone in the house is one thing, but how could you let them play with fire so casually? As a parent, don't you have any common sense?" My mother hadn't yet recovered from the shock, and she stammered, I don't know." The police looked at my mother speechlessly, while my brother sat on the sofa eating a lollipop as if nothing had happened, watching people come and go, laughing and giggling. Someone glanced at my brother and whispered, "Look at that kid, still laughing right after his grandmother just died in an accident." But they didn't know, my brother simply had no heart. As grandma's body passed by me, my nose couldn't help but sting, although she was only kind to me in her final days. Those are still unforgettable memories. At that moment, Dad rushed back, just in time to see grandma's body being carried into the ambulance. He leaned against the door, his legs giving way as he slowly slid down to the floor. My mother worriedly stood in front of my younger brother, her voice faint as she said, You need to calm down first. Our mother is already over 70 years old, and her heart has never been in good condition." Before my father arrived, he had already received the news. His eyes fixed on my younger brother, filled with endless hatred. Suddenly, he let out a furious roar, pushed my mother to the ground, picked up his briefcase, and swung it directly at my younger brother's head. The leather bag struck, and my younger brother was knocked to the floor, his nosebleed staining the ground red. Mother screamed, clutching father's leg, "This really was just an accident. It was an accident." Father pulled mother up from the ground and roared, "Get out of here." Seeing the situation turn sour, the police quickly pulled father away. "What's done is done, please calm down. If you don't pay attention to disciplining your child normally, you resort to hitting and scolding when something goes wrong." The firefighter quickly added, "Exactly, if a big fire breaks out, can you take responsibility for the casualties in the entire building?" Seizing the opportunity, my younger brother quickly ran back into the house. When he came out again, he was holding the remaining string of firecrackers, right in front of all of us. He lit them and threw them at my father. "I just want to play with firecrackers inside the house." The crackling sound of firecrackers erupted once again, smoke filled the air, and everyone silently watched my younger brother. "This is a monster." Grandma's death was ultimately ruled as an accidental death. After settling grandma's affairs, the house was left in complete disarray. Since that day, Dad has never spoken another word to my brother, ignoring him completely, and even rarely speaking to Mom. After grandma was cremated, Dad held the urn and said coldly to Mom, "Let's get a divorce." This time, there was no argument between them. My younger brother suddenly appeared behind me at some point. He didn't speak, just stared at me intently. Early the next morning, Dad had already packed his own luggage, while Mom leaned against the head of the bed in the room, crying with red eyes. He left all the money and the house to Mom and voluntarily gave up custody of both of us. At the moment of departure, I cried and asked Dad, "Dad, are you really leaving?" Dad smiled bitterly and said, "Jenny, be good. Dad knows you're the most sensible. You have to take care of Mom from now on, and if anything happens, be sure to call Dad." I sobbed, "Since I'm so sensible, can't you please not leave, Dad?" Dad sighed and said, "Jenny, it's not your fault, it's all my mistake. I shouldn't have gotten married and had children. I can't possibly live a normal life, and I've caused so much suffering for so many people." With that, he picked up his luggage and left without looking back. From that moment on, there were only the three of us left at home. I promised my dad, so I worked even harder. In the subsequent exam for advancing to middle school, I was admitted to the best middle school in the city with excellent grades. Because of the previous arson incident, the elementary schools in the district were all wary of my younger brother. Seeing that no school was willing to accept my brother, my mother came up with an idea. She took him to change his name and then moved to a different district. After all the hassle, I finally managed to get my brother settled into school just before the September term started. Mom has aged a lot over the past few months. The divorce hit her hard, but she still refuses to give up on my brother. She always hopes that her love can change him, but my brother has proven to her through his actions that some children are born bad and can never be changed. After entering middle school, I consistently maintained the top position in my grade. My younger brother also started elementary school relatively smoothly, although he often got into trouble for pulling girls' hair, fighting with classmates, and poking them with a compass. Fortunately, nothing serious ever happened. It wasn't until every classmate had pocket money that, driven by a child's vanity, he suddenly discovered the benefits of having money, until one day. The book fees totaling 5,000 yuan that had just been collected in my younger brother's class disappeared without a trace. The school took the matter very seriously and immediately reviewed the surveillance footage. The classroom camera clearly captured my younger brother returning to the classroom during a physical education class break. He took the envelope containing the money from the teacher's desk. The teacher called mom to the school with a single phone call. After all, 5,000 yuan was not a small amount, and leaders from the class to the school level each had a very serious conversation with mom. My younger brother was publicly criticized at school, and mom had to compensate and apologize in the parent group chat. As for that 5,000 yuan, it had long been spent by my younger brother in the arcade. I remember it clearly. It was the day of my school award ceremony. I waited until the event ended, but my mother never showed up, in the end. I returned home alone, dejectedly holding my certificate. It wasn't until evening that my mother finally came home, dragging her tired body and bringing my younger brother with her. I sat in the dark living room, clutching my report card and certificate for being first in my grade. Mom saw me and was taken aback. "Why are you sitting in the living room? Have you eaten?" I didn't answer. She walked toward me with a puzzled look until she saw the certificate in my hand. She stared at the certificate for a long time before murmuring, "Mom had forgotten." My brother stood at the door and said gloomily, "I'm hungry." Mom ignored my brother and instead pulled me into her arms, choking back sobs as she said to me, "Jenny, Mom is sorry. You've suffered all these years. It's okay, Mom, I just haven't done well enough." At that moment, my brother raised his voice again. "I'm hungry," Mom continued crying. Her breathing growing rapid, she unconsciously bent over. Her face flushed. "Mom's old illness has flared up again," I quickly said. "Mom, I'll get your medicine." Mom clutched her chest, gasping for breath, and collapsed onto the sofa. Something unexpected happened. My younger brother suddenly grabbed a plate from the table and hurled it at my mother's head. It happened in an instant, and no one had time to react. My mother let out a scream as a gash instantly opened on her brow, blood streaming down her face. My brother was still roaring. I said, "I'm hungry." Mom wiped the blood from her head, rushed over, and slapped my brother twice across the face. She cried out, "Do I owe you? Do I owe you? What more do you want from me? I never should have given birth to you." My brother said nothing, just glared at Mom with hatred. If looks could kill, Mom would have been riddled with holes by his gaze. Over the years, my mother has been raising my younger brother, and it has left her battered and bruised. As my brother grew older, he became more and more like a ticking time bomb, never knowing when he might explode. When my brother, after stumbling through 2 different schools, finally made it to the 6th grade, I was already in high school and no longer living at home on a regular basis. One day, my homeroom teacher suddenly called me out, saying that my younger brother's school had called and couldn't reach my mom. My mom has taken on 2 night shifts to help with household expenses, and sometimes she sleeps during the day to catch up on rest, so she probably didn't hear the phone. I asked for leave and rushed to my brother's school. Only after arriving did I learn that my brother had gotten into an argument with the class monitor. Unable to win the fight, he had actually stabbed the monitor's hand to the desk with a fountain pen. The paramedics had to use an electric knife to cut the pen in order to free it. The squad leader injured 2 tendons in his hand, and when the pen was removed, there were still pieces of flesh stuck inside the barrel. That squad leader had just won first prize in the National Youth Piano Competition. Although this hand will gradually recover in the future, its flexibility will undoubtedly be severely affected. His musical journey came to a permanent halt right here, all because of my younger brother. My brother got expelled from school again, this time. The parents of the other party are both lawyers. They refused to back down, rejected any settlement, and directly chose to file a lawsuit. My mother knelt at the entrance of their home, begging them to give my brother another chance. They called the police and had her taken away. The class monitor's mother told my mother directly, "I've heard about your family's situation, and I do feel sorry for you. But some children are born demons and don't deserve anyone's pity. I've seen children like yours before, completely lacking empathy and dangerously unpredictable. None of them come to a good end." Because my brother wasn't even 14 years old, the court could only try to mediate as much as possible. In the end, my mother had to pay almost all the family's money to the other party. After this incident, my mother seemed to age 10 years overnight. My mother used to have a parenting exchange group, which she joined when she was pregnant with my brother. The group was called Super Mom. As the name suggests, the people communicating inside are all those who, like my mother, have given birth to children with supermale syndrome. Back then, my mother found a lot of comfort in this group. Many people said that children with supermale syndrome are not necessarily sociopaths, they just have a higher probability of it. How could one abandon their own flesh and blood because of that? My mother also firmly believed this, when they were first born. They all thought their children were innocent and adorable, and that they could definitely raise them well. They all believed their children were among the rare exceptions, but as the children grew older, they became increasingly anxious, their bodies covered in bruises, and they asked the seniors in the group what they should do. Ironically, the seniors hardly said a word, they couldn't even figure out how to raise their own children, so how could they guide others? My mother finally had no choice, she simply took a long leave and stayed by my brother's side, watching him around the clock. Ever since she became pregnant with my brother, it was as if he had cast a spell on her from inside her womb. I don't believe it was simply maternal love. My mother never had such an obsession with me. Perhaps it was because I was too sensible and obedient, never giving my mother any cause for worry. So all my good qualities were taken for granted. During the crucial 3 years of high school that followed, my mother stayed at home full-time to look after my brother and hardly paid any attention to me. I gritted my teeth and endured the toughest period of my life all by myself. It finally came to a perfect end with a college entrance exam score of 620. Excitedly, I called my mom, but before I could even share the good news, she kept chattering on the phone, saying, "Your brother has been so well behaved lately, he hasn't caused any trouble. Hasn't been going to the arcade, and just stays in his room all day. I can finally relax." I hung up the phone in silence. When my brother was 13, he had already grown to over 1.7 meters tall, because he didn't have to do anything, spending his days indoors snacking and playing video games. His weight approached 200 pounds, and his personality became even more violent and erratic, since my brother had been quiet for a while and hadn't caused any trouble. I suggested to my mom that we could take him swimming to help him lose weight. At the swimming pool, my brother was clearly excited, looking around and staring at the girls. After I changed into my swimsuit and came out, my younger brother inexplicably stared at me. I avoided his gaze. My younger brother smiled without understanding why. Through his eyes, I somehow felt a wave of nausea in my stomach, watching his receding figure. I felt as if I were seeing an amnesiac demon gradually awakening. My brother dove headfirst into the water. Since it was the weekend, the pool was crowded, and before long, my mother and I lost sight of him. About half an hour later, my brother climbed out of the pool. He walked up to my mother and pointed at the hot dog machine. Mom knew my younger brother was hungry, so she bought one for each of us. Just then, a cry of alarm came from the deep end. "Someone, quick, a child is drowning." Everyone quickly gathered around and worked together to lift the little girl out of the deep water and onto the shore. The little girl's face was deathly pale, and her lips had already turned a purplish blue. Her feet were twisted together due to convulsions. The lifeguard cleared the people around and quickly began performing CPR on the little girl. The little girl's mother was already crying uncontrollably beside her. The people around began silently praying for the little girl. My mother and I exchanged a glance, then both turned our eyes toward my brother without a word. My mother's hands began to tremble, and her breathing grew rapid. I quickly took the asthma inhaler from my bag and handed it to her. Meanwhile, my brother, still chewing on the grilled sausage in his hand, looked at the little girl on the ground and laughed. A mouthful of water spilled from the little girl's lips, and she gradually regained consciousness. The little girl's mother hugged her daughter heartbrokenly and asked, "Sweetie, do you remember who did this to you?" The little girl looked around until she saw her younger brother, then burst into tears out of fear. After the initial shock, everyone began whispering and discussing quietly. The little girl's mother came over in tears, shouting hoarsely, "What did you just do?" My brother said coldly, "It wasn't me." My mother, blushing and mustering her courage, stood in front of that woman. "Yes, my son has been eating a sausage by my side the whole time. Your daughter might have seen wrong." My brother remained silent and continued eating the sausage in his hand. Several other children quickly gathered around, pointing at my brother and saying, "It was him, we all saw it just now. He dragged that little girl into the deep water, and he even took off her swim ring and threw it away." The girl's mother finally lost control. Picking up a wooden stick from the side and preparing to strike her son with it, the mother instinctively shielded her son, taking the blows from the stick on herself. The son sat behind her, unmoved. He murmured softly, "I just wanted to play with her, why wouldn't she let me?" He said those words very softly, perhaps only I heard them, and his eyes were fixed directly on the little girl on the ground. The sound of sirens grew closer outside, and my mother and I were taken to the police station because of my brother. I can't quite remember what happened that day at the police station. I only remember that it was very, very late by the time we got home. Dad gave me a call. On the other end of the line, Dad kept sighing. "Jenny, I transferred some money to your card. This money was originally a reward for you getting into university, but now it can only be used for compensation first. Dad really has no money left. I'm sorry, I've let you down." After Mom used the family savings to compensate the little girl's family, her spirit completely collapsed. Uncharacteristically, she picked up a rolling pin and struck my brother in the mouth. 1, 2, 3. My brother's mouth was gradually beaten into a bloody mess, yet, as if he were born without the ability to feel pain, he managed not to utter a single sound. At that moment, he spat out a large mouthful of blood, along with 5 or 6 teeth that had been knocked out, and in his eyes towards his mother, there was a flash of hatred that had never been seen before. At that moment, I stepped in front of my mother and snatched the rolling pin from her hands, saying, "Mom, if you keep hitting him, you'll kill him." Tears that my mother had been holding back finally burst forth, and she hugged me tightly, crying, "Jenny, I really want to kill him right now, and then I don't want to live either." I grabbed my brother by the hair and dragged him in front of my mother, saying, "Promise Mom, apologize to Mom." The younger brother licked the blood from the corner of his mouth and swallowed it, then stammered, "Mom, I'm sorry." Mom closed her eyes, 2 streams of hot tears rolling down, and then she fiercely pounded her chest. I handed the asthma medicine to my brother and asked him to help Mom back to her room to rest. In the middle of the night, my brother appeared by my bedside like a ghost, startling me into sitting up. I said sternly, "What are you trying to do?" My younger brother smiled and said, "Sister, you're not asleep yet." I said sternly, "Get out of here, otherwise, I'll go tell Mom right now." "Mom is asleep, I can't wake her up." My heart tightened. I saw my brother take a spray bottle out of his pocket and hand it to me, saying, "Mom just asked me to get her medicine." I searched the medicine drawer for a long time but couldn't find it. By the time I found it and brought it to her, Mom had already fallen asleep. I was shocked. This was Mom's asthma medication. I rushed into Mom's bedroom like a madman, only to see her collapse by the bedside, with white foam still clinging to the corner of her mouth. She was no longer breathing, her fingernails all torn and broken, clearly in extreme agony at the moment of death. I grabbed my mother's clothes and cried out, "Mom, why didn't you keep the medicine with you at all times?" My younger brother said expressionlessly, "Mom is just asleep, right?" I was stunned. He truly had no trace of empathy from birth, or perhaps he had no concept of death. I looked at my brother expressionlessly, then dialed the police station's number. After the police arrived, they first tried every possible way to contact my father, but my father's phone was always turned off, making it impossible to reach him. The forensic examiner conducted an autopsy and determined that my mother had died from an asthma attack. I can't even imagine how desperate my mother must have been when she couldn't find her medicine before she died. After my mother's death, what was once a happy family now only consists of me and my younger brother. In the scorching summer heat, before I received my college admission letter, I first received the inheritance transfer documents from my family. The police later called me, and they finally understood why they couldn't get in touch with my father. It was because he had died in a car accident. Fate can be so bizarre. While he was driving at night, a stray dog suddenly darted out from the bushes beside the road. The truck driver ahead swerved to avoid it, but my father, who was already speeding, failed to hit the brakes in time and crashed directly into the truck. He was instantly mangled beyond recognition, with bones scattered everywhere. My father's mental state hasn't been very stable in recent years. When I was a child, I always spent the new year with my mother. On my father's side, there were hardly any close relatives, and distant relatives were all afraid to associate with us. Other than grandma, I had hardly ever seen anyone from my father's side of the family. I once asked my father why, and he patted my head with a smile, saying, "Everyone on your mother's side is good people. Jenny should stay with good people." I half understood. The house, the remaining savings, and the money from my father's previous fund account were all transferred to my name. I had just turned 18 and legally inherited all of this, but along with it came the inheritance of this creepy younger brother. No one wants to live with such a demon. I won't just sit back and wait. I will remove him from my side before he can harm me. Only then can I survive. Yes, I just want to survive. After Mom left, my brother seemed like a completely different person. He became much more restrained in front of me, but the more he did so, the more uneasy I felt, because I understood that his restraint meant the sleeping demon had fully awakened. He had learned to hide and disguise his fangs. One morning, he gently woke me up. I thought he was hungry, but to my surprise, he had actually made breakfast for me, which was quite unusual. He handed me a cup of soy milk and 2 slices of toast. I looked into his eyes, but there was a hint of evasion in his gaze, as if he was avoiding eye contact with me. This only deepened my suspicions, so I slowly opened the toast. Between the 2 slices of bread was a pile of dead cockroaches, and I instantly vomited. He shamelessly asked, "What's wrong, sis? Did I not make it to your taste?" Without replying, I stood up and directly poured the scalding soy milk onto his face. He groaned in agony, writhing on the ground, steam rising incessantly from his body, and large blisters instantly formed on his face. At the same time, I found several undissolved pills in the soybean milk residue on the floor. Though I didn't know exactly what he had put in it, if I had drunk it without caution, the outcome would certainly have been dire. Watching his face scalded and ruined, I tasted a hint of a pleasure I had never felt before. He stared at me, wanting to pounce, but I just looked at him, fixed my gaze on his eyes, and he grew timid. Just like that little white rabbit back then, with its guts spilling out. At night, he rummaged through the medicine cabinet and found the burn ointment. After applying it all over, the wound instantly burned again, the skin splitting and the flesh tearing open. He screamed in agony, the wound on his face oozing a mixture of pus and blood. He was too foolish. I had already mixed quicklime into that ointment. Now, no one could protect him anymore. I glanced at the clock in the room, calculated the time, and frantically pushed open my brother's door. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" My younger brother was already in so much pain that he couldn't speak, curled up on the ground like a large, fleshy worm. Back then, that class monitor's mother said to my mom, "Your child is destined to harm others if left in society. He won't be cast out into society, because I'm here." Because of the burns and infection, my brother was hospitalized for half a month before he was out of danger, but the grooves and scars on his face would become marks he would carry for the rest of his life. On the way back from the hospital, he kept staring at me intently, but I no longer showed my fear. After returning home, he remained silent and locked himself in his room. Late at night, in a half-asleep state, I realized my younger brother had quietly crept up behind me. I exclaimed, "What are you trying to do?" He immediately covered my mouth, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "You got me hospitalized, and now I'm going to get my revenge on you." I pulled out the pepper spray I had prepared earlier from under my pillow and sprayed it directly into his eyes. He covered his eyes in pain and rolled off the bed, and I seized the opportunity to quickly pull out the prepared electric baton. I turned the current to maximum and jabbed it toward the base of his thigh. He instantly began writhing and convulsing on the ground like a dead fish, and I faintly caught a whiff of something burning. I wasn't sure whether it had burned through his pants or scorched his flesh, but I had no intention of stopping. I listened to the crackling of the electric current coursing through his body. A thought flashed through my mind. What if I end up killing him like this? But I quickly dismissed the thought because I had installed cameras in my room in advance. Even if I did kill him, I had evidence that he threatened me first. This was just self-defense. I didn't stop until the electric baton ran out of power. My brother was now foaming at the mouth, his eyes rolled back, and he had lost control of his bladder, urinating all over the floor. A foul, burnt odor continued to emanate from between his legs, and his body still twitched uncontrollably from time to time. I burst into laughter, feeling a sense of liberation. I had been waiting for this moment for over a decade. Whether he is dead or alive, I no longer care. I calmly walked out of the room, opened a bottle of red wine, and poured it into a goblet. "Mom, if you were still alive and could see all of this, would you regret the choice you made back then? You said you would still love me even after my brother was born, but you didn't keep your word. If you couldn't do it, I'll just do it for you." I couldn't stop laughing, looking at my face in the mirror that somewhat resembled my mother's, and I splashed the red wine right onto the glass. The red wine looked just like blood. I sat like that in the living room until dawn. My brother isn't dead. He really wouldn't die from something like this. When I entered the room, I smelled a foul odor. Covering my nose, I saw him glaring at me with a sinister look. He said weakly, "I should have killed you first." I smiled slightly and said, "Don't push yourself. If you could have killed me, you would have done it long ago. You simply can't kill me because you're afraid of me, aren't you?" The younger brother didn't speak. He still struggled to get up. I toyed with the dinner knife in my hand. "I could have let you die like that rabbit back then, but you're my brother. How could I lay a hand on you? So I found a good place for you." My brother watched my movements, seemingly recalling something. He suddenly widened his eyes and stared at me. You've been using me all along. Yes, he was too foolish, only realizing it now after living this long. He is a born bad seed, I am a bad seed made. Some children are born as a black sheet of paper, and no matter how hard you try, it's difficult to bleach it white. Some children are born as a white sheet of paper, but wrong education and constant exposure can also turn it black. Because I am a girl, I am not a supermale like my brother. But my father is, on the surface, my father is a good family man who loves his wife and daughter, but I know deep down, he has an impulse to destroy everything. I've seen him torture and kill animals more than once. Every night, under the pretext of going downstairs to smoke, he actually lures stray cats and dogs with food. My father has never failed. When some homeowners said there was a beast in the community harming stray cats and dogs, my father angrily condemned it in the group chat, telling my mother and me that those people were perverts. My mother didn't know about these things, only I did. I have seen the photos my father kept in the iron box, selfies of him with those mangled, bloody corpses. That joyful expression on my father's face was something I had never seen before. I realized that both my brother and my father could derive a lot of happiness from the suffering of others. The more others suffered, the happier they could be, so I began to observe my younger brother. From the moment he pushed Grandma down the stairs without showing any remorse, I realized he had no empathy at all, and he could even feel the joy of what is called destruction. Who could blame him when Mom and Grandma were so biased? I told you that even if my brother is born, they would still love me. They didn't keep their word, so their ultimate fate can only be to reap what they sow. Although my father and brother are the same kind of person, my father is hypocritical enough to know that he can only torture and kill animals, not harm people. He was afraid that my brother would bring disaster upon him, causing him to get burned, which is why he left with nothing, hastily divorced, and incidentally gained his freedom to do the things he had always suppressed and couldn't do. Unfortunately, my father still couldn't escape the law of cause and effect. The stray dog that suddenly darted out on the night of the car accident took his life, just as he had once kicked an innocent, sleeping puppy to death with his own feet, causing it to lose its breath in an instant. None of us can escape karma. My younger brother struggled to rush over and hit me, his eyes filled with intense resentment. You're a demon, you're the real demon. Where can you send me? I'm still a minor. I smiled faintly. Yes, no matter what crime you commit, the law will be lenient with you because you're a minor. But what about a mental hospital? My younger brother froze. The sound of an ambulance echoed from downstairs. I smiled faintly, picked up a dinner knife, and made 3 or 4 quick cuts on my arm. Red blood streamed down my arm. Laughing, I took a large gulp of red wine. Suddenly, I screamed at the top of my lungs. Murder, murder, my brother is trying to kill me. Help. I was about to run out barefoot when I happened to meet the doctor in the hallway, who had come after receiving my call. Several psychiatrists in white coats rushed in with a stretcher. Trembling with fear, I hid behind them and sobbed. It's him, he's trying to kill me. My brother was finally pushed to the brink of rage, his eyes almost bloodshot. Liar, you liar, I'm going to kill you. He picked up the knife on the table and was about to stab me in the chest. Several doctors quickly tackled my brother to the ground, took a syringe, and injected a dose of sedative into his thigh. With eyes full of hatred toward me, my brother slowly lost consciousness. After my brother was forcibly isolated in the psychiatric hospital, tied to the hospital bed with a leather belt every day. High doses of psychiatric medication gradually made him dull and unresponsive. His attending physician called me into the office. The doctor spoke earnestly. He does indeed exhibit strong antisocial personality traits, and we cannot rule out the possibility that it is related to his innate predisposition to violence. I asked the doctor seriously, is there any possibility of him being cured? The doctor pondered seriously for a moment and said, although it is theoretically possible to cure him, given your brother's current condition, he may have to spend a long time in the psychiatric ward under supervision. After thanking the doctor, I specifically instructed him to use any treatment methods that could help my brother's condition, as long as they were beneficial. There was no need to seek my consent. Before leaving, I went to my brother's hospital room. Through the iron-barred window, I saw my brother with vacant eyes and drool hanging from the corner of his mouth. He stared fixedly at me, his gaze no longer carrying the murderous intent it once had, instead revealing a hint of dullness. I grabbed the iron bars and said, Harrison, everyone has their own place, and yours should have been here from the start. Do you remember the rabbit Mom gave us when we were kids? I've finally turned you into another rabbit. After hearing my words, my brother lifted his head and murmured, "Sister, will you come to pick me up when I get better?" I didn't answer him, but simply closed that iron window, because I hoped he would be forever welded inside this ward, to die in there, to rot in there. That would be his best ending. But at the moment I turned away, what I didn't know was that he was watching my retreating figure, a gloomy smile curling at the corner of his lips. After getting rid of this demon, I decided to start my life over. First, I sold the house my mother left behind, then withdrew all the money from my father's stock and fund accounts. I went alone to the city where I attended university, cutting off all ties with my hometown. Throughout my university years, I consistently excelled both academically and in character. In my senior year, I started a business venture with my classmates. The entrepreneurial project was related to the pet industry. Many teachers and classmates asked me why I chose to start a business in the pet field. I couldn't answer. How could I tell them that the only happy memory from my childhood was the moment I watched Chinkai being eaten by the little white rabbit? I am not like my father, who takes pleasure in tormenting the weak. I am not my brother either, hurting all those close to me. I am just more hypocritical. Tormenting people like them brings me more joy. After all, I am a higher existence than them. My entrepreneurial project really took off by riding the wave of new media. Online businesses such as pet transportation, pet snack agency, and pet boarding have made me a fortune. Right after graduation, I bought a small single-family house with a yard in the suburbs outright. I thought life would continue peacefully and securely like this, until one day, an unexpected guest arrived at my home. Returning from work, I found a man sitting in my yard. That figure felt strangely familiar to me. The moment he turned his head, I froze in place. He wore a deep black mask, and between his brows, there was a familiar aura of killing intent. Could this be my brother? Shouldn't he still be locked up in the psychiatric hospital back in our hometown? I trembled and asked, "Who are you? How did you get into my yard?" The man smiled and said, "It's me, sis. How come you don't recognize me after 8 years apart?" I said coldly, "You've got the wrong person. I don't have a brother." The man didn't speak but instead removed his mask, revealing a face covered in burn scars. I gasped sharply. He had really come back. It had indeed been 8 years since I last saw him. The boy who was 13 or 14 back then had now grown into an adult. The appearance has indeed become unrecognizable. He is no longer as obese as before, but those hollow eyes still resemble black holes, as if wanting to draw everything around into an endless darkness. He took a little white rabbit out of the cage, held it in his arms, stroking it while murmuring softly, "Back then, I asked you if one day I got better, would you come to pick me up, but why didn't you answer me?" I calmed down and looked at him, speaking unhurriedly, "Since you're here, come in and have a meal." Suddenly, his face began to twitch, and he lifted the rabbit by its ears, bringing it before me. He swung the rabbit and smashed it against the wall, killing it instantly, splattering blood all over my face. He grabbed my neck fiercely and said, "I asked you why you didn't answer me." His strength was growing, and I felt my breathing becoming increasingly difficult. He thought I would be afraid, that I would beg for mercy, that I would kneel and confess to him, but he thought too much, because I once said that I am the only person in this world who would never be afraid of him. I pried open his fingers, one by one, from around my neck, then a slap landed on his face. I bent down to pick up the rabbit he had killed on the ground, stood up, and said coldly, "Let's have stewed rabbit for dinner tonight." He looked at me silently. A gust of wind blew through, causing the withered tree in the yard to sway, and the other small animals in the cage instantly curled up, trembling uncontrollably. But it was clearly the height of summer in July. Why were they feeling cold? What were they afraid of? I took out a set of treasured knives from the cabinet, boning knife, scraper, slicing knife, all neatly arranged. A glass of red wine with ice paired with soothing music. Cooking is sometimes an art just like that. First, use an axe and a blunt knife to break it open, then carefully separate the fascia, muscle, and bones bit by bit with the boning knife. Seeing the dogs in the yard already drooling over the bones, I poured out a large basin of bones for them. These dogs are all large breeds, fighting and tearing at each other, chewing the bones into fragments and swallowing them whole. The meat is picked out, soaked, rinsed, then slowly cut into chunks, shredded, and finally minced into filling. As I cooked, I spoke to my brother, but he remained silent, not uttering a word. Just as I was washing the blood from my hands, a phone call came. The call was from my brother's psychiatric hospital, urgently asking if he had contacted me recently. I looked into my brother's eyes, remained silent for a moment, and then said coldly, "No, we haven't been in touch for many years." Then I hung up the phone. This might be the last help I ever give him. Early the next morning, I fertilized the withered tree in the yard. It is July now, and I don't want it to continue withering. It should enjoy the summer bloom like the other trees. It deserves exclusive love. Turning back to look at the room, my younger brother was no longer there. Perhaps he left on his own. Since then, he never came to see me again. A year had passed, and my brother never showed up again. Nor did he disturb me any further, until one day, a hospital vehicle and a police car were parked at the entrance of my home. Curious, I stepped forward to take a look and saw an elderly professor with graying temples getting out of the car. He looked at me with a grave expression and said, "You must be Harrison's sister, right?" I nodded and asked, "What's wrong? Is there something going on?" The police officer furrowed his brow and said, "He recently escaped from the mental hospital. We think he's quite dangerous, so we came specifically to warn you." My mind instantly went blank, and I instinctively took 2 steps back. "Did he just escape from the mental hospital recently?" The police officer said. "Yes." My heart trembled. "Who was that person from last year?" My hands began to go numb, and my breathing became rapid. Seeing this, the police officer quickly helped me sit down on a chair and asked, "Is this asthma? Do you have any medicine?" I nodded, trembling as I fumbled through my bag, pulled out the spray, and took 2 deep breaths before gradually calming down. The director sighed and said, "In the hospital, he used boiling water to disfigure a fellow patient's face. That patient was transferred to the burn unit of a general hospital last year for treatment. Later, when we followed up, we found that the patient had also disappeared from the burn unit." The police officer cleared his throat and said, "We find this matter quite suspicious, and given his level of danger, we made a special trip here. One reason is to warn you to be extra cautious, and the other is to ask you to inform us promptly if you have any leads." I nodded and said, "All right, if I come across any leads, I'll contact you." The dean handed over a metal box, saying these were all the items sorted out from my younger brother's hospital room. After taking it, I felt as if the box weighed 1,000 pounds. As if it were trying to drag me alive into the ground and down to hell. As we were leaving, the police officer paused in front of the tree in the courtyard and examined it for a moment. He remarked with interest, "This tree is growing so lushly. I wonder what kind of fertilizer was used." I did not respond, but instead opened the iron box, inside which lay a letter. On it was boldly written a sentence, "Sister, we have only just begun." At that moment, a series of crackling firecrackers went off on the roadside outside the courtyard. Across the street, the director slowly peeled off a layer of human skin mask from his face. A burned face slowly revealed itself. After hearing the 2 stories above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.